A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you kind of a book review today, but more of a book comparison, I suppose you would say. Today I want to talk about two books by the same author, and this was an author that I wasn't familiar with. And in fact, the only reason I heard about this author was through this RPG Adventurer Conqueror King, this RPG system. Now, I'm a fan of role-playing game rules. I love going through, reading them, comparing them to other rule sets and whatnot. And as I was reading this one, which, by the way, really great rule system if you're a fan of old school RPGs, but I'll talk about this in another video. I came across this. It said, as with the original fantasy role-playing game and the inspiration it found in Poul Anderson's 3 Hearts and 3 Lions and Michael Moorcock's Universal Champions multiverse, blah, 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 blah. And that led me to kind of go and look up this Poul Anderson's 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. I'd never heard of this book before. So I went and I looked up the author and got my hands on a copy of 3 Hearts and 3 Lions and found that while this is a fantasy novel, Poul Anderson was also a very prolific science fiction writer as well. So that led me to kind of look into some of his science fiction work, and I picked up a copy of his book Tau Zero and thought it might be a good video just to compare his fantasy and his science fiction, as I'm a fan of both genres. And I often find that it's very difficult for authors who are very prolific in one genre to kind of branch out into other genres. And by this, I mean, if you look at someone like Stephen King is a very prolific horror author, and yet his fantasy books, and I know this is going to stir some shit. I'm in the minority here, please understand that, but his attempt at a fantasy series with the Dark Tower books, they were fucking boring, in my opinion, and I'm allowed to have my opinion, and your opinion will differ, and I understand that. And that's fine if you loved the Dark Tower books. I actually read every single one of those books hoping it would get better. I even sat through the fucking whole book that was a train ride where the train was like Thomas the Tank Engine telling fucking riddles. Whatever. The only great science fiction book that Stephen King ever wrote, well, the greatest, I should say, because he does have others, but the Tommyknockers. But with that said, I was really interested in, after reading 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, knowing that Poul Anderson is more of a science fiction writer after doing a bit of research, what his science fiction books would be like compared to his fantasy novels. So that is what this episode, I guess, is going to be. So let's get straight into another episode of I'm going to start with 3 Hearts and 3 Lions because basically this was the book that got me onto Poul Anderson. Now, this is a story about a man named Holger Carlson. He is a Danish engineer. And basically this guy is working against the Nazis during the Second World War. The story that we are given is told by a different character who is recounting the story of Holgar, who is basically a man of science, a man of engineering. He starts to kind of fight for the resistance, helping the Allies during World War II, and during a confrontation, trying to smuggle a man out of danger. He and his resistance fighters are met with Nazi opposition, and he is apparently shot, but when he wakes up, it is in another world. He finds that he is naked, and he ultimately finds a horse that has armor and weaponry and things like that that all seem to fit him very well. It's very reminiscent to me of Joel Rosenberg's The Sleeping Dragon. I think it was the Guardians of the Flame series, but obviously this came way, way before it. I believe this was written in, if you kind of bear with me, this was written in 1961. So you have this idea of a guy who is from somewhat modern times, and he wakes up in a fantasy world. Now, the 3 hearts and 3 lions in the title refers to the symbology on the shield that Holgar finds. He goes off on a journey to work out how he can get back to his original time and original universe. As a man of science, he understands this principle of kind of multiverse dynamics and whatnot. And over the course of his journey, he meets a number of characters that I recognized from my days playing 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, but at the time were really quite unique and were pretty much taken from mythology. Now, with that being said, there is no doubt in my mind after reading this book that the people who were designing Dungeons and Dragons back in the day, 1st edition and 2nd edition, had read this novel and were quite taken by some of the ideas in it. By that, I mean, one of the first characters that Holgar meets is a swan may, a human maiden with a cloak of feathers who can turn into a swan. In the Forgotten Realms monster manual, monster folio, I should say, because it was really loose leaf sleeves, back for 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, the Swan May was a lawful good race of kind of swan women who would help adventurers. At one point in the story, they come across a troll. The troll is described as having green skin, dark pits for eyes, almost hairless, kind of a beaked nose, and the only way to defeat it is to kill it and then burn, like cut off parts of its body and then burn those parts. Same thing happens in this book. They come up against a troll, which is kind of the unbeatable creature, and they work out. And it's almost described word for word here as it was in the original monster manuals and things for Dungeons and Dragons. So you can see that the Dungeons and Dragons creators paid a lot of homage to novels like 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, and it really disappoints me that I only found out about this book like 2 months ago. I only found out about this author about 2 months ago, and that is a fault on both my part and the fucking education system that I grew up with that should be teaching students about literature like this. And yes, this is fucking literature. Now, This book itself it's great. It's a kind of a linear fucking quest where the hero goes from A to B to C. It's not like a fucking epic fantasy novel. Not like, for example, The Way of Kings. Yeah. I mean, look at the difference in size there. It's not fucking meant to be. It's meant to be a fantasy novel that delves into the tropes of fantasy and even creates a few of them. It's a good book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was a little disappointed at the ending, but with that said, that is because I come from a background of, I mean, for fuck's sake, these are all books that I want to read and review. I come from a background of literature. But this book is a fantastic read. I recommend this book actually to people who want to get their children into fantasy literature. Read them a chapter a night. It's a fantastic story. It's really well done. It's fantastically bookended, so you get a well-rounded story. Like, this is a one-off fucking novel, although I'm led to believe that there are more. But yeah, like, if you want your children to learn about traditional fantasy tropes, 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. It's a great book. So after reading this, after looking at Poul Anderson, finding out he's a prolific science fiction writer, I went, fuck it, why not? And I ordered Tau Zero, the SF Masterworks collection. And on the cover, it says the ultimate hard science fiction novel. Now, what does that mean by hard science fiction? Hard science fiction is basically a science fiction novel that incorporates actual proper science into the storytelling and the contextualization and all that kind of fun stuff. Okay, what is this book about? This book is about a starship in the future, not too far in the future, of course, with a crew of 50 people on board that are heading towards a distant planet that can humans can inhabit. Okay, it's got the same kind of system that humans can inhabit. They use a special engine called the Broussard engine, which time outside of the ship travels faster than time inside of the ship, so that it might be 100 years outside, but maybe only 20 years inside have passed. And I'm playing with the math there. It's all wrong. This ship, on its way to this new planet, runs into a nebula, which damages the deceleration drive, which means the ship is basically going faster and cannot slow down, which means that time outside the ship is passing at a phenomenal rate, while inside the ship it's kind of going at a normal rate. And the crew realize what has happened and have to kind of adjust and whatnot. This book, I am so ashamed to say this, should be taught at a fucking high school level in Australia, because the books that we are given, especially the sci-fi books that we are given, are shit compared to the fucking masterpiece that is Tau Zero. And it says Masterworks on the fucking cover. Look at that. Masterworks. This is a fucking masterwork. I absolutely love this book for so many reasons. Number one, let's talk about the science. Can't understand a fucking thing about science in this fucking book. It is all mathematical. But the beauty part is you don't have to. The way the author incorporates it into the story means that it's just a part of the fucking story. It's not like, oh, you're not going to enjoy it if you don't understand what how fucking V to the X to the Y to the Z. And yeah, I sound like a fucking rapper, but who gives a shit? You don't need that fucking knowledge of math. He incorporates it so well into the book. Secondly, this isn't a fucking book about the spaceship and time travel and time distortions and fucking whatnot. This is a book about human relations, primarily. So there are 50 people on board this this ship. The what is the name of the ship? I can't even remember. Something Christine. Wait, there it is. Lenora Christine is the name of the ship on this thing. So there are 50 people on board this ship. 25 men, 25 women. They understand that they're going to a planet. That planet is going to be colonized and that they are going to have to kind of pair up. Everyone is aware of this. At the beginning of the book, you get the first officer and the security officer, and they're not even on the ship yet. They're just having like walking around and talking and having dinner and whatnot. And the first officer says to the security officer, we should pair up because this and that and the other. Okay. So you get this idea now that the 25 men and the 25 women are going to pair up on the ship. There are rules on the ship, however, of forming attachments. So if you have a pair and then this person wants to go off and do something with another person, you can't get angry about that because that's just the nature of the way things go, and they're all trying to work out the roommate and everything. And suddenly, and this is in chapter fucking 1 of this book, it hits a whole new level of fucking sci-fi, because not only are you dealing with the science fiction aspect, but you're dealing with drama as well. And this is in the first fucking chapter of this book. It is phenomenal. And then relationships break down, relationships kind of expand and all of this kind of thing. And the security officer becomes the everyman character. And while there are 50 people on this ship, he doesn't go into all like detail. There are just certain characters that we meet and we see and we kind of pass by. And then you get this idea of, all right, this is what's going to happen. There's an impending doom, because obviously, you know, if it's a sci-fi novel, something's going to happen. Something bad happens. They hit the nebula. When they hit the nebula, the deceleration drive fucking goes, and the ship can only keep going forward, can only keep accelerating. What do they fucking do? That, combined with the human element of this book, up until the end of the novel, the last fucking page has you on the edge of your fucking seat. Like, you literally are wondering, how is this going? Like, how are people dealing with it? That's the thing. It's how people are dealing with the crisis. And people trying to focus on, okay, if we get these people to focus on this aspect of it, then they're not going to panic. And then these people panic. All right, we've got to get these people. And then you've got like the captain, like the relationship between the captain, the security officer, and the first mate. They're like the first navigator guy, chick, who was introduced in the beginning of the book, and then it's kind of their relationship, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful book. And to this day, I do not know why this has not been made into a television show or a fucking movie. Because Tau Zero is the epitome of hard science fiction. If you want your science fiction to be full of like factually correct information, this is the book you should read. Poul Anderson an absolutely phenomenal writer. Now, these two books are completely different in tone. They're completely different in style. If you read this and didn't know the author and read this and didn't know the author, you wouldn't think they were from the same fucking person. But I cannot recommend them. They are absolutely fantastic books. So please go and check them out, or even just check out some of the author's other work. You will be 100% pleasantly surprised. I do recommend highly Tau Zero if you are a fan of science fiction. 3 Hearts and 3 Lions if you're a fan of fantasy. Both, wait, let me just put that the right way up. Both if you're just a fan of good writing. I've said enough. I'm going to leave it there. Please, everyone, like, subscribe, comment below. Follow us, Facebook, our website, www.playlandsmedia.com. We have some fantastic shit coming up that you're going to be fucking excited for. I'm excited. I know you're excited. Fuck you, you're excited. And stay safe. See you in the next video.